The encounter at Jacob's Well marks a strategic infiltration into hostile territory. At the height of the midday sun, the eternal Word stepped directly into a region defined by centuries of ritual and ethnic exclusion. To grasp the scale of this move, we have to look at the worldview of the ancient Near East. In biblical theology, the nations were understood as being under the authority of lesser spiritual powers, while Israel was reserved as the direct, personal inheritance of God. This map shows the historical split of that inheritance. Following Solomon's reign, the kingdom fractured into two competing territories, Judea in the south and Samaria in the north. This physical split formalized a system of purity laws designed to keep these populations segregated. It is this wall of separation that makes the 4th chapter of John's Gospel so significant. While most travelers took the long route across the Jordan River to avoid the region, Jesus followed a sovereign mandate known as Dei, a divine necessity. By crossing this boundary, Christ moved into a fractured land to execute the prophetic restoration of his people. Jesus arrived at the Samaritan town of Sychar and sat down beside Jacob's well. It was the 6th hour, the absolute peak of the midday heat. This specific location is an axis mundi, a historical coordinate where heaven and earth intersected for the patriarchs Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph. The stone structure here sits at the base of the mountain where the Samaritans claimed God truly dwelt. In the biblical narrative, geography carries memory. By occupying this specific well curb, Jesus is making a direct claim to a contested spiritual territory. A man sitting alone at a foreign well follows the precise literary pattern of a patriarchal betrothal. It signals that a divine bridegroom has arrived to reclaim his collective, unfaithful bride. By positioning himself at this specific threshold, Jesus forces a confrontation over which mountain and which people house the presence of God. The kingdom of God operates through an inverted theater. The divine warrior bypasses the elite religious institutions of Rome and Jerusalem to launch his mission through a social outcast. The woman who approaches the well is a figure of profound marginalization, carrying the systemic scars of ethnic hostility and gender exclusion. This portrayal anchors the theology of incarnational participation. When the eternal Word assumed human flesh, he entered directly into our concrete marginalization or thrownness, rather than assuming a safe, generic humanity. The Gospel uses the Greek term kekapiakos to describe his fatigue. God redeems humanity from deep inside its physical suffering and historical trauma, rather than from a transcendent distance. Jesus begins with a simple request: "Give me a drink." This invitation to help instantly dismantles the rigid purity codes that had classified this woman as a contaminated object for her entire life. He establishes the relationship before revelation, choosing to enter a state of temporary dependence to restore her relational dignity. The woman immediately raises the supreme theological controversy of her time, the territorial dispute between the rival temples on Mount Gerizim and Jerusalem. Jesus dismantles this geographical standoff by refusing to choose between the two sanctuaries. He declares that true worship must be in spirit and truth, relocating the sanctuary away from physical monuments. The axis mundi is no longer a static mountain, it is a person. The locus of God's presence has become a mobile, living relationship. The woman's perception heals in stages. She moves from a hostile Jew to addressing him as Sir, to recognizing a prophet, and finally anticipating the Messiah. Once she finally recognizes him, she leaves her water pot behind at the well and returns to the city. By leaving the vessel in the dust, she abandons the recursive, exhausting cycles of survival required by her previous life. The shunned outcast is transformed into the first apostolic herald of the new covenant, carrying the internal fountain of the Spirit back to her people. As the town pours out to meet him, the ancient prophecy of Ezekiel 37 is fulfilled. The lost sheep of Joseph are gathered back to the fold, and the 1,000-year-old wound of Israel begins to heal. The kingdom of God reclaims the earth by transforming marginalized outcasts into the living, mobile temples of a new creation.